Hello you guys, so today we're going to be installing Windows XP. Why might we be installing Windows XP in 2025? Well, here are my main points for actually using and playing on the Windows XP rig. So basically, most of these games that we have here, a lot of these older games that I have, were meant to be played on Windows XP or Windows Vista, say, and the compatibility for these games are just much more simpler and easier on the Windows XP because that's what they're meant to be ran on. Now that being said, we're going to go over a few of the games, but here we're actually creating the installation either disk. We could use a floppy disk or we could use a USB drive. In my case, I actually use a USB drive, and I'll show you guys the installation of the actual USB drive and all the difficulties I did have. I had many difficulties installing Windows XP, even with the tools given. And basically, some of the tools that we have here is, well, the one I use was Win Setup from USB 1.10. This tool will basically allow you to put an ISO file onto your USB, and this will be bootable. So sometimes the USB itself does not recognize, basically, the PC does not recognize USBs, and that could be a driver issue. And if that's the case, you'd probably try to get the disk version. This way you can install Windows XP directly through the disk. So now basically we're going to look at our versions of Windows XP. Which one would we prefer? Now there's a lot of versions of Windows XP. Some of them that I was able to come across was actually developer made. I don't know exactly who developed them, but someone on Internet Archive had allowed people to download Windows XP Super Nano Lite and Windows XP Super Nano X2. Now those are smaller, more compact versions of Windows XP. They do have, the regular standard XP. I actually download the Professional Home XP. You're going to need an ISO file if you're going to make a creation tool USB. So when that happens, once you get that ISO file, you're going to put that into Win Setup, and then I'm going to show you guys how exactly I do it right here. Alrighty, you guys, so this is called Win Setup from USB. This is going to allow you to make a Windows installation tool for the XP. So on the top, you can see it says no USB disks, not properly partitioned. That is where your USB should come up. Once that comes up, you're going to see auto format it with FBinst. That actually helped out a lot. This actually made it discoverable. I don't know how, but it made it discoverable on my actual PC, so that worked out really well. So I used auto format it with FBinst. Now, what we're going to be doing is adding USB disk. So it's got to be the Windows 2000 XP 2003 setup. Basically, we're going to need an ISO like I mentioned. So there's three ISOs that I potentially was looking at, which was the Super Nano, the Super Light, and the regular Professional Edition. I tried all three, had many difficulties, but eventually I managed to get the Windows XP Professional Edition working, and I just happened to have an old key from an older rig, so I used that key. So here we are. Basically, once we get that Windows 2000 XP 2003 setup clicked off, we're going to end up again installing that ISO file directly onto this USB and making it bootable. You're then going to press go, and then you're going to follow the functions. So what you're going to want to do is basically place the USB inside the motherboard in the USB drive. Basically, we're going to be attempting to boot through the USB. You probably have to press delete or F12 to get over to the boot menu once the BIOS opens up. This I actually don't have on video. But hopefully, once that boots up, you could start the installation. So basically, everything that could have went wrong for me went wrong. everything. I had several different boot tools, disks, everything I could have used. This USB was the one to finally finish the job, which I was so thankful. Again, anything that could have happened did happen. So here we go. So here I'm kind of just going through the motions, like I said. This I didn't really understand. ACPI unit processor 64. I went with that. It's going to give me, I believe, some drivers. Like I said, it was fairly complicated. Here we are. Setup could not find the floppy drive. Basically, it wasn't able to see the additional drive. You're going to want to make sure that drive is in FAT32. I think there is an NTFS version, but I would start with FAT32 and then, you know, mess around with it a little bit and see what works best for you in that system. Here we are. So we're setting up starting Windows. Here we go. So this was the worst part. That partition for the actual drive, your main drive, is not there. The only thing you're seeing here is just the USB, which is completely pointless. I mean, you really needed that hard drive to be available. So, like I said, this is like trial and error. This is my first time installing Windows XP, just like anybody else. First starting up with this. So what we had to do was basically restart. So here we are, restarting again. We went through many restarts. It took over a day to get this done. On this rig, like I said, it's to boot to the boot menu, go to F12, and then you're gonna head over. Then you're gonna press the the boot tool, but you want to format again and just make sure that USB is ready and capable. Here we are. We're looking through the UEFI. I want to boot the correct boot tool. I want to try to get that hard drive to be compatible because so far the system's not even showing that boot drive's even there, which is a problem because there's going to be no way of us actually getting in there and installing onto that hard drive if it's not visible. So what I did was I actually replaced the hard drive. This is like I said, a lot of trial and error. I actually replaced the hard drive. So I had a WD Blue 500 gigabyte. I had tried a Toshiba. This was like a mini 5400 RPM. That one actually didn't work. But my larger 7200 RPM actually did work. It was a WD Blue, and it had mentioned on the top in writing on this hard drive. It said advanced format drive to achieve Windows XP multi-partition. I saw that. I'm like, this is perfect. But here we are. So first part of the Windows XP Professional. Um, let's see. Let me is missing. So we're missing something. I'm probably gonna restart again. But yeah, so basically that Windows, that hard drive, when I swapped it out a few times, it actually did end up working. The WD Blue had mentioned advanced format drive to achieve full performance, and it said Windows XP multi-partition cloning software users use this software available, etc. But basically, that's how I knew that this hard drive should work and there shouldn't be any issues. It looks like the compatibility should be good, so that's what we're kind of banking on. Now this screen was always pretty terrifying because you never knew if it was just going to stay there for hours on end or actually load up. Basically, we're going to press F1 right here. We're going to boot into that. Press Windows XP. Here we're going to do first part of Windows XP Professional SP2 setup from partition 0. Now that should be the actual hard drive. But we're going to figure that out right now. Let's see what we got. Okay, so you may need a third-party RAID driver. You can press F6. Automated system recovery if you needed it and already had it on the system. Here we are. So ACPI uniprocessor X64. This is going to allow you to get those, I believe, the third-party drivers that you need. To install, I believe. So this I actually did have to do. If you press other, the installation's probably gonna fail. I mean, there's so many ways this install could fail. I've failed many installs. I probably tried to do 30 installs, and each and every one failed. But I did finally figure out a way. And again, we have basically a partition, but that's a USB partition, so that's not the one. Alright, so that took a long time. Starting fresh again. Here we go. I changed the USB out, a different creation tool. Same process, basically how we made the last one, but this one's a professional edition compared to the Nano or the Super Light. I tried pretty much both of those. I didn't get either of those to work. I'm sure there is a way, but we're trying to figure out what is the easiest way to install Windows XP. Um, Trying different tools is probably your best bet, because if you try one and then for some reason it's just not working, you can do trial and error and then try to diagnose it. But that's going to take a bit more work for you to just be able to look up what might be the issue and if you could even fix it. Um, but yeah, basically we're gonna again download the F6 drivers, figure out what we need. It is a little time consuming. This is why this process, downloading Windows XP, had taken me about a day and a half to download everything. There we go. So we finally got it. As you guys can see, that's the main hard drive partition. That's exactly what we need to boot from. So we're going to enter the install on that boot drive. I don't know why I did the 8 megabytes. Okay, so basically we have to format the C partition. That's going to be the drive that's going to be the one we install the actual operating system on. Now this could get a little confusing, and like I said, there is a lot that goes into actually trying to install Windows XP. The main reason was probably just because I wanted to get the games going. There's the quick version and then the standard. Believe it or not, I did the standard and the standard worked. So that's what I was worried about. I just wanted something that worked. I didn't care if it took a little longer. I'll wait for the process to go through. That's fine. Alrighty, you guys. So I didn't want you guys to have to watch and sit through the entire format. This is actually 900% speed, so this will go much quicker at this pace. It is a very long format, but in this case, we managed to make it very useful. You'll see at the end where we get after this. Alright, you must select a different partition to continue. Press enter. Alright, so we're going to go through that process again. Here we are. So we're going to repeat exactly what we did before. We're going to press F1 right here to continue into the boot. There we go. Might just take a moment. Again, we're going to go through the XP 2000 and 2003 setup. In some cases, now here's the problem right here. The keyboard and mouse weren't working. We had to use the PSP ports on the back. Keyboard and mouse had to be hooked up to the PSP ports on the back of the motherboard. They're different than the USB ports. Sometimes, I don't know why, but within the BIOS, for some reason, USB ports don't work. I think it's like a driver issue. This is where basically you would download the drivers. But right here, you would auto detect F6. You would auto detect F6 SATA RAID, SCSI driver for your disk. That's what I did. I did 1, 2, and then right here, we're going to look at the second part of Windows XP. Looks like we actually did the first one already. So we should be able to boot right into our main disk. There we go. So that's what we did. We're going to be booting up HD0, which is our standard main hard drive. The other one, like I said, is just the USB to boot up. Normally you guys probably know about like the USB creation tool for Windows. That tool, the Windows USB creation tool, was, I believe it was made specifically for Windows 7 and Windows 10. So the issue with that is that tool won't work for this application. That's why I showed you guys Win setup. That's going to be kind of like the sweet spot for this time period. With this tool, you could also do Windows Vista 7, 8, 10, 11, um, and also some Linux distributions. So that could be a very helpful tool all around. Here we are. So we're actually finally booting into Windows XP. So I can only be so glad. Um, let's see. Like I said, everything is very time consuming, even if it's not. It's time consuming. So let's get through this. Alright, let's see it loading up. This should even load up faster than most XP rigs. This is all pretty modern hardware, I'd say, between 2012 and 2014. So the only thing that's a little older is the actual GPU. The graphics card's from, I believe, 2005. Still within the decent range, but the motherboard's an FM2 Plus board. Um, Here we are. So new exciting look. We're going to be installing Windows. I'd already collected information, got that update, prepared to install. Basically, we're just going to wait. Alright, so it's going to push us back into the setup again. Here we go. So we're going. I sped it up quite a bit so we don't have to wait through everything. But you can see the type of time this would normally take. This is at 900%, this install, so it's so much quicker than it normally would have been. Basically, here we're gonna have to put in some information. The product key has to go in. You Sometimes they do allow you to skip it, and you can put it in at a later time. We want to make sure the language is correct. But yeah, here I'm just putting in the product key, just trying to figure out which one of my keys that I do have actually worked. Um, it is kind of like trial and error. Some of them just for whatever reason don't work. They are all old keys. I got lucky and was able to use one that actually did work. Alright, there we go. So we are in. Now this system is going to be primarily offline. I don't expect to ever really play online with this Windows XP rig. So now here we're just installing our users, whoever's going to be using the rig. Maybe you just put random names. Um, but yeah, we got it, guys. Next thing you're going to have to do is install the drivers. Basically, you can go to NVIDIA or AMD. They should have the graphics card drivers. You're going to need those. You're going to need some sound drivers. If you're not getting audio in this type of older rig, you're going to want the sound drivers. What actually helped me, they have something on the Internet Archive, which was the Ready XP. It had pretty much everything I could have needed. Most of the drivers. If you are going to play games, usually the game itself will come with whatever DirectX you need, but you can also try to attempt to find the DirectX that you specifically need. It is a 32-bit, not a 64-bit, so just keep that in mind. If you do attempt to install any 64-bit programs, it's probably not going to work. They have to be compatible with Windows XP. Thank you again, guys, for watching. Hopefully, this was a little bit informational. Again, like I said, what we would do next would be basically pick up the drivers. We're going to go take a USB, download our drivers directly onto that USB. If you need sound, if your video's acting a little wonky, you're going to want to get all those updated. You're going to want the graphics card driver. If there's motherboard drivers, pick those up. Anything driver related, um, you're going to want to get in case you have any issues. Specifically, the sound driver, that's definitely one of the big ones, as well as video driver. Um, but yeah, thanks again for watching, guys. Hopefully, you guys enjoyed. If you guys want to see more videos like this, please leave a like and subscribe.